Good morning. Thank you for your patience. We are now live on YouTube and recording on WebEx.
Good morning and welcome to the May 2nd New York State DNA Subcommittee meeting. At this time, I'll take attendance to establish a quorum. We will conduct the business today through roll call as members are present in Albany and virtually. So please respond when I call on you. Dr. Bieber.
Fred Bieber, present.
Dr. Corrado.
Sorry about that. Kathy Corrado, present.
Dr. Gettings.
Catherine Gettings, present.
Dr. Kidd. It looks like Dr. Kidd is not on the meeting at the moment. So we'll pass Dr. Kidd. Dr. Smith.
Jennifer Smith, present.
Dr. Sozier.
Amanda Souza, present.
Okay, thank you all. And including myself, we have established a quorum. Our first item on the agenda is to review and approve the meeting agenda. So you've all received a draft agenda for today's meeting. Is there any discussion regarding this agenda?
Mike, I have one comment to make.
Yes.
On number 5, old business, letter D, it says NIST interagency report. Should that be the report on the expert working group on human factors and forensic DNA interpretation?
Yes, that is for the human factors
Okay.
report. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda for this meeting?
So moved.
Dr. Corrado, thank you. Do I have a second? Dr.
I do
Sozier?
that, Mike.
Dr. Sozier has seconded the motion. So when I call on you, please state your vote. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber?
Fred Bieber, aye.
Dr. Corrado?
Aye.
Dr. Gettings?
Aye.
Dr. Smith?
I'll abstain since I was not present.
And thank you. And Dr. Sozier?
Amanda Souza, aye.
Okay, the motion carries. Next up is to review and approve the draft minutes from the February 28, 2025 meeting. We have received draft minutes of the February 28, 2025 meeting. Is there any discussion regarding these minutes? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to accept the minutes of the February 28, 2025 meeting?
So moved. Catherine Gettings.
I have a motion from Dr. Gettings. Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay, looks like there was a tie. I'll give it to Dr. Corrado, has seconded the motion. So when I call on you, please state your vote. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber?
Fred Bieber, aye.
Dr. Corrado?
Aye.
Dr. Gettings?
Aye.
Dr. Smith?
Abstain.
And Dr. Sozier?
Aye.
The motion carries. Next up on our agenda is our accreditation and laboratory updates. And the first lab we'll talk about here from is the Erie County Central Police Services Forensic Laboratory. We do have members of the lab that are available for any discussion. This is again for informational purposes, so there will be no vote. In April, the laboratory underwent a surveillance activity and there were no findings. ANAB has issued a continuation of accreditation based on the results of the activity. Do we have any questions for the laboratory? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to our next lab, which is the New York State Police Crime Lab. Again, no vote will be necessary. There are individuals that can speak if there are any questions. The laboratory underwent an external QAS audit in January of 2024 and submitted the appropriate documentation to the FBI for review. The laboratory followed up with the FBI in April 2025 as they had not received closeout documentation. It was determined the closeout letters were sent to the lab in September 2024, but were not received due to technical issues. The laboratory has since received the letters, and based on the FBI's review, the laboratory is in compliance with the external audit requirements and the FBI's quality assurance standards. Do we have any questions for the laboratory? Hearing none, we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is old business. We'll first start with a partial match update. And so at this time, Ms. Palmer will give an update regarding the partial match program.
It's just pulling up some numbers. Give me 1 second. The partial match program, there are no updates from the last time. So that brings our total of 93 applications and 49 names released, with additional testing could not conform the other 44, and all investigations are closed. And if you think, I'll just run right into the familial search.
Yes. Well, does anyone have any questions on the partial match? Ms. Palmer? Okay. Then let's go ahead and move on to the next item, which is the familial search update.
Since the last DNA subcommittee meeting in February, we have had 2 initial applications received, 2 applications approved, and 3 searches completed with no results released. So that brings our totals to 73 applications, 57 initial with 8 renewals and 8 resubmissions, 52 of those approved, 13 rejected, 3 withdrawn, and 5 in the review stage. Of the approved, 10 are in the search queue currently, 42 searches have been completed, 31 no results released, 11 with released of names, 6 of those are open and 5 of those are closed.
Okay, thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Palmer on the familial search update? Okay. Next up on old business, CODIS bulletins. So it's my understanding that Tom Leach has notified OFS that there are no relevant CODIS bulletins at this time. Okay, next up in old business, we have the NIST Human Factors Report. So at the last meeting, we voted to form a subgroup of 3 members to review and rate the recommendations from the NIST Human Factors Report and provide a statement to the commission. On this committee were Dr. Bieber, Dr. Corrado, and Dr. Sozier, who were assigned to this subgroup. And so, Dr. Sozier, could you please provide us with an update?
Sure, Mike. Thanks. So, as you said, Dr. Beaver, Dr. Corrado, and I are charged with reviewing this document and reporting back with recommendations for the DNA subcommittee to discuss in order to create this statement for the commission. So Kathy and Fred, please jump in at any time while I'm giving my update. So in creating this document, the human factors document, the expert working group was charged with several things. Those included examining human factors as they relate to policies, procedures, and practices within the field of forensic DNA interpretation. They were also charged with developing practices based on scientifically sound research to reduce the likelihood and consequence of errors in forensic DNA interpretation. Also wanted to point out that the title of this document is Forensic DNA Interpretation and Human Factors, Improving Practice Through a Systems Approach. So I want to note that DNA interpretation is defined in the document as the process of evaluating DNA data for ascertaining genotypes. So this could include making assumptions on or inferences about the number of contributors, distinguishing between alleles and artifacts, assessing possible degradation, inhibitions, stochastic effects, and determining whether the data are suitable for comparison. So I wanted to just point out that this document goes well beyond forensic DNA interpretation and also addresses the production, evaluation, documentation, and communication of DNA comparison results. This document is 414 pages long, and the word should is used 842 times, and the word must is used 118 times. And I'm saying this in our update really just because I want to manage expectations. Obviously, a lot of work went into the document, but it is not easy to read. So our subgroup has already met 2 times and decided it is best for us to focus our comments on the 44 recommendations rather than the text itself. There are sections in the text of the document that make recommendations using the word should, for example, but the text recommendations are not incorporated into one of the 44 recommendations in the document. So what we've done so far is we have formatted the 44 recommendations into a table where we each provide our comments to discuss in our subgroup. We have started filling in our discussion points, and what I can say so far is that just a couple of recommendations are easy. So for example, they don't apply to the laboratories. So for example, 7.3 is about federal government providing funding. So they're pretty easy to get through. The other recommendations will take more investigation, more time as to why they were made, and will require discussions among our subgroup. For example, recommendation 4.2, I'll just read that quickly, is to avoid conveying an unsupported level of precision. Forensic science service providers should express likelihood ratios as an order of magnitude or to one significant figure. We haven't discussed this recommendation yet, and while I agree in principle that we should not use more significant figures than the precision we have, I have not been able to locate the substantiation in the document for using only one significant figure. I imagine that making a recommendation on 4.2, as with other recommendations, will take more work. So fortunately, it's unlikely that we will be able to discuss all the recommendations before our next meeting, but we'll continue to meet and give you another update at that meeting. Oh, Mike, I can't hear you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Suzer, for that update. And does anyone else have any questions at this point? Okay, yeah. At this moment, I think we'll move on to the next item, which is for the other subgroup, which is for the mixture interpretation for the NIST Scientific Foundation review on DNA mixture interpretation. So thank you, Dr. Suzer and Dr. Corrado and Dr. Bieber. And I think you're going to find agreement with our subgroup as well. These documents are very large and a lot of information to have to go through. So at the last meeting, we also voted to form a second subgroup of 3 members to review the NIST Scientific Foundation review on DNA mixture interpretation. and again, provide a summary on the guidance of the key takeaways for the labs to consider. We also requested labs provide the subcommittee with any updates to their probabilistic genotyping validation. So all labs have provided those updates or have notified that there have been no updates to the Office of Forensic Services. So Dr. Kidd, Dr. Smith, and I are participating in this subgroup. And so I'd like to ask Dr. Smith if you would please provide an update on the status of the subgroup's work.
Certainly. The DNA subgroup of Dr. Coble, Dr. Kidd, and myself reviewed the NIST IR 8351 report dated December 2024, which is entitled DNA Mixture Interpretation, a NIST Scientific Foundation review. The document consists of 6 chapters. 4 chapters included key takeaway statements. Our working group reviewed the report and focused on these statements. There are a total of 24. Of these 24 statements, our group concurs with 14 statements, further finding that 13 of those are already acknowledged, accepted, and accounted for by current practices within the forensic DNA community. In other words, sort of no new news here. There are 11 key takeaway statements with which we do not fully concur, and these will be addressed specifically as we prepare our letter for this larger body to consider. Additionally, Dr. Kidd observed that though released in December 2024, this report failed to include articles on polymorphic microhaplotypes and DNA mixture analysis that were published prior to the release of the report. And these articles are pertinent to the Chapter 6 discussion and serve to refute one of the key takeaway statements. And we'll go into more detail when we present our findings to you. We need a little additional time. We do anticipate we want to be ready, though, for this meeting. And I'm on the hook to provide that first draft of the letter. And I will get that to my fellow subgroup members for their review. And then we will certainly get it to the rest of the group. And like I said, our goal is to get it to you before our next meeting.
Hey, thank you so much, Dr. Smith. Does anyone have any questions for this subgroup? Dr. Bieber.
Yes, Dr. Smith, thanks for that summary. Did your team address yet the issue of verbal predicates to likelihood ratios, which, and the practices vary widely in the forensic community? I personally oppose them because I feel there's no solid basis for them.
Again, we are pretty much addressing, Fred, the key takeaway statements that they have provided in those reports. And certainly, if you feel that's important to have as a part of our discussion, we can address that more specifically in our discussions.
Should I write to you, Dr. Smith, or to Dr. Coble?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bieber. Dr. Corrado?
I just have a question based on what Fred just asked. I wonder if before the next meeting, perhaps one person from our subgroup could meet with one person from the other subgroup to just, it might be worthwhile to see if there's any recommendations that are overlapping, just so that we could, you know, if we know that up front, we could bring that back to our subgroups and say, hey, these are overlapping, you know, let's talk about that. So we can maybe make sure that we're not spending a lot of time coming up with something then to get to the main group and then we, you know, we can't agree on it. So I don't know, I just thought that might be a good idea if maybe we could do that. I don't know what others think about that.
Yes, certainly. I mean, I think that I would certainly volunteer on behalf of our small group to work with anyone from your group to take a look at those and make sure we have some consistency in our responses.
I would volunteer to do that from our group as well, if that's okay.
Sounds good. Sounds good to me. So thank you, Dr. Smith and Dr. Corrado, for volunteering to do that. It's a great point. Are there any other questions at this point? Are there any questions for either subgroup that have come up in just the last couple of minutes before we start to move on? Okay, so I think right now, as we heard from our updates, that both subgroups need a little bit more time. Again, the goal, the hope is that before our next meeting, we'll be able to have something that we can submit to the Forensic Science Commission and sort of a summary and of the two documents. So we'll continue moving on with working on these documents, and I think that's where we stand at the moment. Okay. New business, next item, new business on our agenda. The first topic is next generation sequencing validation. And this will be a vote to approve the use of NGS. The New York State Police Crime Laboratory has submitted an executive summary and validation documents for next generation sequencing using the MySeq FGX system. Members from the laboratory are here today to present the information on the validation. So we will turn the meeting over to the New York State Police Crime Laboratory and let them give us their presentation on their validation and executive summary.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. Today, we'd like to talk to you about an internal validation of the Verigen Forensic Intelligence Kit that's been ongoing at the New York State Police Forensic Investigation Center. For this validation, as I'm sure many of you know, that Verigen is now a QIAGEN company, and we have partnered with them for validation assistance to bring this project to fruition.
Can you please identify yourself for the record?
Oh, my apologies. My name is Jamie Belrose, and I work at the New York State Police.
And I don't think that the microphone at the podium is picking you up, so can you maybe present from here? Is that possible? Or you can try.
There we go. It might just take a second when you click the button.
Would you like me to start again?
Probably for the people remotely, they couldn't hear you.
My apologies. We'll start again.
Take two.
My name is Jamie Belrose, and I work for the New York State Police Forensic Investigation Center. Good morning. Thank you for having us. Today, we'd like to discuss an internal validation that's been ongoing at the New York State Police, specifically the Verigen Forensic Intelligence Kit. And as I'm sure many of you know, Verigen is now a QIAGEN company, and we have partnered with QIAGEN for validation assistance to bring this project to fruition. So we'd like to start with why have we decided to validate the Intelligence Kit? The New York State Police workflow currently includes Global Filer and Y-Filer plus STR kits. However, there are still cases where STR profiles are successfully generated with CODIS eligibility, but no CODIS associations are reported. In those cases, when all leads and all testing methods have been considered, the question becomes how can the lab assist investigators and still move cases forward? So one option is Verigen's Forensic Intelligence Kit. The specific kit has 10,230 forensically relevant SNP loci for database searching. This kit has overlap with the direct-to-consumer loci. Verogen has intentionally avoided loci that lend themselves to medical information. Most of the kit is kinship focused for forensic investigative genetic genealogy. There are 6 marker types included within the kit, as you can see here. We have X and Y SNPs, identity informative SNPs, ancestry informative SNPs, phenotype informative SNPs, and kinship informative SNPs. And as you can see from this number, they make up the large bulk of this particular kit. The average amplicon size in this kit is 150 base pairs, lending itself well to the examination of fragmented DNA. And for reference, global filer is approximately 60 to 460 base pairs. This kit also targets 1 nanogram of input DNA in a volume of 25 microliters, very generous. And it also, the universal analysis software associated with this kit that we'll discuss, offers a pre-configured GEDmatch Pro report for direct upload. So, if we are not starting from a DNA extract, the sample processing approach would be as follows in our lab. Extraction would be on QIAGEN EZ1 Advanced Excel using the associated QIAGEN EZ1 DNA Investigator Kit, followed by quantification using Applied Biosystems Quant Studio 5 real-time PCR system and the associated QuantiFiler Trio kit. Those samples would then be amplified on a ProFlex using Verogen's Forensic Intelligence Kit. Those samples would then be sequenced on an Illumina MiSeq FGX instrument, and we would use Verogen's universal analysis software. The way in which the portions of the Kintelligence workflow that vary from your traditional STR workflow are library preparation using the Forensic Intelligence Kit. Those samples are then loaded onto the MiSeq FGX instrument for cluster generation and sequencing. And those files are then directly transferred to the universal analysis software for data analysis and visualization. For this validation, we ran 33 samples. That equates to 12 MiSeq FGX sequencing runs. And this includes 1 run where a library was repeated because we have 2 instruments. So we tested for instrument reproducibility. The reagents consumed doing this validation were 3 Kintelligence kits, 12 standard flow cells, and we followed the manufacturer's recommended plexity of 3 samples per flow cell. So for this particular validation, we conducted the following studies: run quality metrics, sensitivity, precision and accuracy, known and mock samples, mixture identification, contamination, and known kinship associations in GEDmatch Pro. And we'll briefly discuss the high points of each. So for the run quality metrics that are analyzed in the universal analysis software, they were all passed for all runs. You can see them here highlighted in green. Here are our runs. Across the top, we have cluster density, cluster passing, phasing, pre-phasing, and etc. All of them are green, meaning they are within the manufacturer's recommended range, with the exception of this one highlighted here in orange. For this particular one, the manufacturer's recommended range for cluster density, the upper limit is 650. This one is reported at 664. However, of the 3 samples in this run, 2 of them had data that were suitable for analysis. For sensitivity, the dilution series were created from 2 donors, 1 male and 1 female. All dilution series had 4 points, 1,000, 100, 50, and 20 picograms. When these data were analyzed using an analytical threshold, which we set equal to our interpretation threshold, at 3%, it produced profiles that they exceed the minimum threshold for upload to GEDmatch Pro, which is 6,000, with the exception of 2 of our lowest concentrations at 20 picograms. However, if we reduce the analytical threshold to 1.5%, all of the samples in the sensitivity study, those profiles met the minimum required for upload to GEDmatch Pro. Additionally, we assessed dropout in our dilution series, and we found that no specific loci showed a propensity for dropout. Next, for precision and accuracy, we evaluated 6 positive controls, 2 NISB samples, and 6 no template controls. For library preparation, we utilized two approaches. We have a team approach where the 3 members of our NGS team each performed a different step in the library preparation, for example, purification, normalization, etc. We also tested a single analyst preparing the library from start to finish. A bulk majority of our validation was performed on one of our MySeq instruments. However, we did take one of those libraries and rerun it on our second MySeq instrument. So using these data, we were able to evaluate operator and instrument variability. So for operator variability between those 2 library approaches that I discussed, we showed that the read counts were comparable between the 2 methods. And here we present with ranges for the various samples that I discussed. For our 2 instruments, again, also the locus call rates were very similar. You can see here, this is the locus call rate for instrument 1 is 98.39%, and for instrument 2, 97.83%. Next, we evaluated concordance, and we utilized 2 profiles that have known SNP genotypes. So we utilized NA24385 and NIST-B. And at a 3%, I should back up. For this particular study, discordant events were defined as allele dropout, locus dropout, and drop-in. So when these data were evaluated using an analytical threshold of 3%, NA24385 showed 1,010 discordant events, and NIST-B showed 120. However, as expected, if you were to lower the threshold, you would expect additional alleles to exceed that threshold and for instances of dropout to diminish. And in fact, that's what we saw. When we lowered the threshold to 1.5%, the number of discordant events in NA24385 were 461, and for NIST-B was 65. Additionally, the profile accuracy of the evaluated samples at 3% was 98.40%, and when lowered to 1.5% was 99.26%, meaning that when we use an analytical threshold of 1.5%, 99.26% of the expected genotypes were obtained. For known and mock samples, we utilized 5 known samples created from 2 donors. We used 5 mock samples as well. These consisted of blood, semen, pulled hair, bone, and a pseudo-reference. And we have here the total read counts for known samples. The average is 11.8 million, and for the mock samples was 13.9 million. The locus call rates associated with these, the average was 99.25, which on average equates to loss of 77 loci dropping out. For these particular samples, we also evaluated phenotype and ancestry informative loci because we had access to self-reported data. And all UAS estimations for hair, eye, and ancestry were consistent among replicates as well as the self-reported data from the donors, with the exception of one. One donor reported dark brown hair. The UAS estimated that they had black hair. We didn't consider this to be discrepant as they're very similar. We also tested for mixture identification in the UAS. That is because we will not be interpreting mixtures, as GenMatch Pro does not accept mixtures for forensic investigative genealogy purposes. So we tested the ability of the software to detect that a mixture is present so that we could stop testing at that point. To test this, we created 2 mixture samples, male-male, male-female. We selected the mixing ratio of 1 to 19. This was to make the minor a bit challenging for detection, but yet still feasible. So the answer is yes. The UAS is capable of detecting when a mixture is present. And so you can see that here, that when these mixture samples were analyzed in the universal analysis software, the biological sex was reported as inconclusive, even when the 2 individuals were of the same biological sex. And the contributor status in the software flagged to us that this was a mixture. Additionally, there are some changes in the profiles that the analyst can be on the lookout for. When mixtures are compared to single source samples, in general, mixtures show increased heterozygosity, and they show greater locus imbalance. When specifically considering the X-SNP loci, when a male is involved in the mixtures show decreased heterozygosity and greater locus imbalance as well when compared to single source females. Additionally, the quality indicators in the software, mixture samples showed greater than 5.5 times the number of quality indicators when compared to a single source profile.
Could I ask a question about that last slide, slide 14?
Yes, of course.
Thanks, Fred Bieber here. Thank you. With regard to the mixtures, do you think it would be helpful to create mixtures that involved a parent and a child or two siblings?
So you're referring to the fact that one would expect them to, first order relatives, to share a considerable amount
Correct.
of DNA.
Yes. My rhetorical question is, would this detect a mixture of two brothers or a father-son, for example?
I would like to think so, that there would still be enough variability there that we might be able to pick up a difference. So they would have the same, if for example, the father's son would have the same Y profile, so we wouldn't expect any differences in heterozygosity at the Y loci. But perhaps at the autosomal loci, depending on the heterozygosity of the parents, we might still expect an increase in heterozygosity. And then also depending on the ratio in which they are mixed, we might still expect to see the imbalance at each of the loci in terms of balance of those alleles.
Since relatives are often an issue in forensic cases, it would be my idea or suggestion that you might consider expanding your mixture validation to include a couple of pairs of relatives.
Thank you for your suggestion, Dr. Bieber. We'll certainly take that into consideration.
Thank you.
Jamie, can I follow up on that? This is Catherine. So my question is, what would your normal workflow be? Would you have already generated an STR profile before you would use Kintelligence, in which case you would have that information that might give you some indication of whether you have relatives involved or a mixture to begin with?
Yes, Dr. Gettings, that is correct. We intend to follow the NIJ interim policy, and we would have already developed an STR profile. So if it were a mixture, we would detect it then. If you're thinking that perhaps NGS technology is more sensitive than CE technology, and that the earlier global filer profiles, for example, happen to miss a mixture, using these particular data, we would, at this point in time, we expect to be able to detect them. But yes, Dr. Gettings is correct. We do intend to develop STR profiles so that after the investigative lead, we could then do the STR confirmations as required.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
So for contamination and artifact assessment, we evaluated 5 positives and 5 no template control samples. We'll discuss those data on the next slide. But for our 4 female samples evaluated, they had 0 Y SNPs called, and 1 of our male samples had an X locus drop-in allele. For artifact assessment, we're defining artifact as an unexpected allele or one that does not match the reference genome or a known variant. And for all 32 validation samples were evaluated for artifacts, and at 3%, only 1 allele was flagged. And when we lowered the analytical threshold to 1.5%, 17 alleles were flagged across 12 samples. However, they were flagged, but they were not officially called as alleles, meaning that these particular unexpected alleles exceeded the minimum read count, but they did not exceed the threshold. We also evaluated run-to-run carryover, and we did this by reassigning the unique dual indices from the previous run to the current run and monitored for detection, and we did not observe any carryover. So regarding the 5 positives and the 5 no template control samples that were evaluated for drop-in, for the positive controls, we evaluated 51,150 loci at an AT of 3%, and we observed 0 instances of drop-in. When we lowered the analytical threshold to 1.5%, we observed 19 instances of drop-in. For the no template control, again, we analyzed 51,150 loci, and we observed 9 instances of drop-in. And when we lowered the analytical threshold, we observed 30 instances of drop-in. So you can see here that even after evaluating more than 100,000 loci for events of drop-in, only 49 were observed, meaning that the drop-in frequencies when using either of these analytical thresholds is well below 1%. So as I mentioned, our end goal is really kinship associations via database searching. So when we designed our kinship associations using GEDmatch Pro, we requested individuals that had direct-to-consumer profiles and were willing to upload them to GEDmatch Pro. We got 6 unique donor profiles. We have a father-daughter pair. We have an individual with known family members in the database, and we have a self-match. We uploaded all 14 of our dilution series, the 100, the 50, and the 20 picogram samples, and all dilutions match their associated 1 nanogram sample. Additionally, samples with very low locus call rates, so just over that 6,000 minimum threshold for upload, for example, 6,290, these samples still matched their known relatives. And the matches that were reported, they were still out to 5th degrees of relatedness, although unconfirmed. Interestingly, one of our 20 picogram samples met the minimum threshold at 6,177. However, no matches were reported. So we contacted GEDmatch to inquire, and they indicated to us that it was also a data quality issue. So what is our intended use of Kintelligence data? For cases where all avenues have been exhausted, an STR profile has been generated, and no CODIS association has been reported, we would consider using Kintelligence to generate investigative leads by developing an in-house SNP profile that would be uploaded to GEDmatch Pro for database searching. The lab would then provide the match list to the submitting agency for further genealogical investigation. The lab would then help to confirm individuals of interest via references that were submitted by the agency and develop STR profiles for direct comparison. And with that, we'll take any questions that you have.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Great job.
Thank you.
Did you detect any variation in the lots of the kits that you used? And in this study, did you use various lots of the kit? And I'm also interested in the timing between handover from Verogen to QIAGEN in the supplies and lots that you were providing, because we all want to make sure that these kits have consistency, and that as more labs become available, it's will be available to use.
And can I ask, since we're not referring back to slides, would you mind coming to the table now? And you can bring the clicker in case someone does.
Certainly.
So you're on camera. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess like I was thank you.
Hello, I'm Olivia Norris. I also work for the New York State Police Forensic Investigation Center.
I'm Jody Cook. I work at the New York State Police Forensic Investigation Center. So we have considered your question. However, for this particular validation, we only used 1 lot. And that's because as part of the validation assistance, all of the reagents were supplied to us as a package. But we are aware of your concerns and are considering for our other validations that we have in progress. And we will monitor if there are any changes from the lots that come in versus the validation data.
And have you considered what your QA approach is going to be for assessing the kits when they come in? If based on any of this information, is there some key factor you're going to be looking at?
Cost.
Costs, yes.
Hey, Mike, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm having a very hard time hearing the conversation. I don't know if anyone else is, or is it just on my end?
And I agree. It was much better, I think, when they were at the podium speaking.
Sorry, would you like to? If we turn that mic off, does it make the other mics more sensitive? That's potentially. Yeah. Okay, can we try a quick sound test? Good morning. Can you hear us?
That sounds much better.
And just project really well, please.
So my question was about the quality assessment of the kits, and if you, based on the study that you've done, are you considering parameters for the QA/QC of those incoming kits?
We don't currently have anything solid. Certainly, we've been discussing it, and we also belong to the FGX users group that's hosted through QIAGEN that helps us connect with other labs that are working through validations. But yes, it's very costly to run the Kintelligence Kit is a major concern. We estimate that above and beyond what we have in our lab, it's approximately $2,000 per sample for Kintelligence. So we're considering that with the 12 reactions in the Kintelligence Kit, we'd have to run at least maybe a NIST sample, using that as a control. We have NIST traceable samples, we have NIST samples available in our lab, sort of like a performance check after a vendor visit. We would run NIST samples to confirm that everything is working as expected.
Great. Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I think Kathy has her hand up, and I have a few as well.
Sorry.
But do you want to go first, Kathy?
Sure, thank you.
Let's see.
So I also want to say good job, the validation and the presentation. Jamie was excellent. One of the things I have or I'd like to talk about, and it's not specifically because of this validation, but I think when the DNA subcommittee is asked to review and approve validations of new technology, in addition to the validation summary, it would help if we could see both the procedure and the reporting policies to go along with it. And the reason I say that is that, as we know, validations are to be used to inform the procedure and the interpretation policies. It's sort of difficult to determine if the validations are sufficient without knowing the policies and in how the technology is going to be implemented. Like, for example, the sensitivity studies are only going to be valid if the lowest templates that you looked at in the sensitivity study are, your lowest template allowed to be amped in your casework. And in particular, like in this validation, I'm interested about the phenotypic informative SNPs, and are they going to be, or the ancestry SNPs as well, are they going to be interpreted? Are they going to be reported? Because if they're not, then, perhaps the validation was sufficient. If they are, then maybe we have more questions. So I would just like to say, number one, that I hope in the future we could get those policies to look at with the validation. So I don't know, we can discuss, if that's a motion or not required. But so I guess that's partly why I have some questions. So for instance, my question would be, what is your intended, I know your intended target template amount is 1,000 picograms, but what is your lower limit that you're going to allow to be used for these samples?
We haven't definitively decided, but based on our sensitivity study and the results that we obtained in GenMatch Pro, down to 100 picograms, we were still able to match, the known donors to themselves. So below that, we did see changes in the match list.
Okay. And then I have a couple other questions that are sort of related to this type of thing about not knowing what your policy is. Like, for instance, what is going to be your policy for calling a negative control or a positive control acceptable? How many drop-in events or what other metrics? I mean, I appreciate your validation showed a lot of the metrics that you looked at. What metrics would be used to determine if it's a negative control or a positive control is acceptable? What is your policy for declaring a mixture? Those types of questions. So I guess, I could ask you all this now, or maybe it would make sense for us to perhaps request that we have all that information of how you intend to implement it before we vote on whether we want to approve the validation. Because again, I think the validation is very good. I'm not questioning it. I'm just saying that it's hard to determine if it's all, if everything that we feel needs to be there is there, if we don't know what the procedures are.
I think that's a great point, Dr. Corrado. I have a similar question myself. Like, I think in the study you show, like the minimum number of SNPs, but are there other metrics as well? Like, for example, high heterozygosity or high heterozygotes. Is that a flag that would not proceed forward with with an upload? What are sort of the quality metrics that you're looking at before you pass a sample up to the next step? But I don't want to step on the folks who had their hands up. So I think Dr. Gettings had a question before Dr. Bieber raised his hand. So let's go to Dr. Gettings first, and Fred, will get to you in just a minute.
Sure. I mean, Kathy covered the main thing that I was asking, and that might be a question for Shelley. If we can, see the protocol as a part of this, or do we have to vote on the validation as a standalone?
I don't think you could. Yeah, you can always ask for more information before you make any action.
Okay, and we don't have to vote on anything today. We can say we need that information, and yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was also concerned about the phenotyping and the ancestry. And from the presentation, I didn't really get the sense that you plan to report that information, but it would be very tempting to do so, I think, even just verbally reporting it if you don't find someone through GEDmatch. I mean, I would feel compelled to do so if it were me, but you have to be really careful. And so at least reading the source publications that those assays came from is really important to understand what those results mean. And each of the source publications has a genotyping tool and a prediction tool that the UAS is kind of based on, but I would want, if it were my lab, I would want to run a lot of samples with different phenotypes, different ancestries, run them through both prediction models, understand what those prediction probabilities mean, just because it doesn't match for black hair and the person has dark brown hair, but they have a 5% prediction probability for dark brown hair. That's not really a wrong answer. It's a more nuanced result, and so just making sure you understand what those results mean and to not mislead an investigation with those results. But they can be really powerful and really helpful, so I wouldn't say the right decision is to not use them, but you would really need to think about how you're going to report that information. So I don't know if you guys can comment on what you're thinking in the use of that information.
We had asked QIAGEN about exporting the report to upload. Yeah, we asked QIAGEN about exporting a report that is suitable for upload to IRISplex.
Mm-hmm.
They told us that they're working on it.
Okay.
So we're going to evaluate when that became available.
Okay, I think that you can see the genotypes though, right? And the interfaces for IRISplex and HIRISplex are like radio buttons that you can kind of toggle. So you could do some of that with the capability that you have right now, I think. So if that wasn't available by the time you're needing to wrap up your validation, or I don't know, I would think you'd want to go ahead and just do that if you're considering using that information. Okay.
And I would, if I could just add, I 100% agree with that. And I think it would be important to have this as part of your policy. Are you reporting it and are you not? Because the last thing you want is to have that analyst discretion of some people might not. Are you officially reporting it, or as Dr. Getting said, is it going to be something you might tell an investigator? And I honestly think it's an issue too for a discovery purpose, or what if your policy is to not report it and to not interpret it and or report it, and yet it goes through discovery, and then a defense person sees something that says, well, it's blonde hair or something, and their defendant is dark hair, and then what if that comes up in trial? So I really think that these things need to be thought about, how that will be handled. I don't know how other labs that are using this handle those things, but I think those are all decisions that need to be thought about before you put this into practice.
I definitely agree. I have a few other like really more minor points or questions for you guys, if I can just cover those, and then I can turn it over to somebody else. So that run that you had, the sequencing run with the high cluster density, in that run you had three samples, 2 were 1 nanogram and 1 was 100 picogram. And for the 100 picogram sample, I think I'm reading this right, that it said there was a UAS error and that sample kind of failed. But I don't see where you discuss whether or not that UAS error is related to the high cluster density. And then, in general, I mean, this goes to the protocols. What would you do if you had a high cluster density in a sequencing run? Would you still use that data? So if you can speak to that issue, that would be great.
What we'll say is the one sample was a complete error, as you said, and so we were unable to look at that at all for troubleshooting purposes. And the two remaining we were able to look at regarding the cluster density being above. We looked at the samples individually, and when one was, I believe, a mixture, and one was a mock sample, very high read counts for the samples. So when we looked at them, we did not see any additional concerns with the data compared to their related, data overall of the entire validation. The cluster density was not significantly higher, and per the manufacturer guideline, they do say these data are still able to be viewed. And regarding a QA procedure, that would say a QC procedure that would state how we would evaluate, we certainly will be considering that, and along with flow cell, lot numbers, all of those things. So, but we have not fully decided anything firm on that.
Okay, so if you're going to accept something that's over the recommendation, then you need to have some other limit, some limit where this is higher than ideal, but we'll still accept it, and then some other place where you won't accept it, right?
There's a potential to not accept if we look at the data, but we would have to.
Okay.
As I said, we did look at those two samples, and they were acceptable data for validation.
Okay, and yeah, maybe that's a question you can ask QIAGEN. Is it more likely that that sample that failed, that had an error, was it because there was high cluster density? Or you're likely to have more failures like that in a run where there's high cluster density, right? Was it a factor? It's just, in reading the validation, that's kind of an obvious question to me. Was that a contributing factor to the failure,
And sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Particularly like low quantity sample, actually we did another quant as purification. So we know the quantity is very low for that sample. So maybe there was some error during the PCR reaction, not PCR1, PCR2. So that may contribute to the error as well, because it cannot be detected.
Okay. Let's see. Another question is, you have a note in there that says the Y SNPs tend to be performing lower on average as a group of markers than the other types of markers. But I couldn't tell from looking at the validation what the biological sex of the samples that were considered for looking at locus differences across loci, or for determining which marker sets worked better, because it would be important if you had a mixture of male and female samples in the samples that you're considering for that, because all the other markers, aside from Y markers, are going to work better in a female sample because they're not competing for the Y primers. So when you're looking at issues like that of combining these marker sets on autosomal and Y chromosome, it's important to tell the reader of your validation what the biological sex of the samples is that you're considering. So do you know that offhand, or can you comment on that?
We'll certainly look into it for you.
Okay. I think it would be useful to add. And then the last thing, because I worked on the 2391 series intelligence data that I think you were using for your validation, I saw that you have some places where you see that we had incomplete data, that we didn't report it because we were trying to be conservative and not give you any wrong genotypes. But if it's an option within your lab to share your results on 2391B with me, that would be great for making our sample better, or the data that we have available better, especially if you saw things that were wrong, that looked entirely wrong to you. I'd be really interested to know that. We tried to be very conservative in setting the threshold, so we didn't give you anything wrong, and we erred on the side of just not giving you the data. But we do hope that will evolve, and we can provide better data to people in the future. So I'd be happy to hear from you guys on that.
certainly ask.
Okay, thanks. That's it for me.
Thank you, Dr. Gettings. Dr. Bieber.
Thanks. I have one comment and one quick question. The comment is a follow-up on Kathleen's important point. I think the elephant in the room here is the word discovery. So I would recommend that your team develop a robust plan for how you're going to deal with discovery requests, because they will inevitably ask for everything. And so I don't have an opinion at the moment about how you should react to discovery requests, but they will come and they will request all the data. The second point is actually a question. Is there a plan in New York State now to use Kintelligence on all the family searches that you've done so far, the ones that have turned over a name and those that have not? What, in other words, is that going to be part of the policy to use this more potentially more robust method for those family search requests that have come in for over the last 5 to 7 years? Thank you.
Partnering Kintelligence after a familial search is not currently part of the plan now.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sorry, we do not intend to partner Kintelligence with familial searching. So if familial searching, let's say, was not fruitful, then there would not be an automatic transfer to test using Kintelligence. No, that's not the plan.
Would the DAs in New York have to make a request for that? What would be the opportunity for that to happen?
I think the agencies, perhaps the DA's office, would contact the lab and discuss with management what their options are to move the case forward.
Okay, thank you.
I think if I may, as my prerogative as chair, ask a quick follow-up to Fred's before we move on to Dr. Sozer. So do you currently have some kind of a triage process where you're trying to identify cases that would qualify to go to Kintelligence for this kind of, testing, or are you just sort of like, are you focusing on unidentified human remains at all, or is it all sort of casework driven?
I think the decision whether or not to use Kintelligence would be based on case-by-case basis and agency requests, but certainly we're considering unidentified human remains, yes.
Thank you. Dr. Sozer, you are next.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks so much for a nice presentation. And I have a less technical question, I guess, than the others. But when I was reading the validation study, I got a little confused at the beginning, because in the header it says QIAGEN, and in the header is in New York State Police. So I was wondering if you could tell me there were 5 people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people listed on this report. And what role did each person, who are they with and what role did they play? Jamie, I see, you gave the presentation, which again was very nice, but I just kind of wanted to get an understanding of who conducted the validation testing and creation of the report.
So the individuals on the report are a woman named Cassandra Taylor. She's with QIAGEN. And then our previous technical leader, who retired in mid-April, Russ Kennig. And then the 3 members of our team seated here, myself, Anthula, and Jolene. So as part of the validation assistance that we worked with through QIAGEN, our team did all of the wet work in the lab. We prepared all the samples, ran all the sequencing runs. We then transferred the files to QIAGEN, and they analyzed the data using workbooks, and they wrote the first draft of the report. They then provided those to us, and we evaluated every cell in every workbook of their data, and we finalized the report.
So when you did the analysis, did you have did you have their data when you analyzed it? Or was that done independently? And I want to say I really appreciate how expensive this testing is. You know, so I do appreciate that.
Our data that we obtained after each run was basically uploaded to a box data storage site where they downloaded it. They analyzed it into these workbooks that Jamie already discussed. They then re-uploaded our data that had been processed and analyzed by them to us. And when we received those workbooks back, as Jamie also stated, we looked at every single portion of all of those workbooks. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but we didn't analyze the projects on our own in addition to what they had processed for us, if that is what you're asking.
Is the process that you used in your validation the process that you're going to use in testing?
I'm not sure we understand your question, Dr.
Perhaps you can explain the workbooks.
Oh,
Okay, there might be some confusion there as to what the workbooks are.
in general, because there are so many, as you saw, SNPs involved in the intelligence kit, there are many, there is just a tremendous amount of data to compare and process. So a workbook from American Kaijin Company standpoint, for instance, they broke them down into our studies. So one was regarding contamination. So all of those 5 positive controls and those 5 non-template controls, for instance, would be within that workbook. And there are multiple sheets or Excel sheets within that workbook that will do the diagnostic analysis, you know, comparing, looking at the actual profiles and genotypes themselves. When do we see drop-in, making all of those calls, tabulating that. That is all done within the contamination assessment workbook. And then there are also many other workbooks associated with the other studies. So I hope that helps. Sorry for, it makes sense to us, so it's. I mean, I think in casework itself, we would basically be generating that GEDmatch Pro file, and that would be the ultimate and only probably piece of that data that would continue on, if you will.
Dr. Souza, do you have any follow-up, or your question was addressed?
No, yeah, thanks. And I think that it'll be interesting to see the procedures when we get those.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Dr. Corrado.
Thanks. I just have 2 additional questions because a lot of my other ones were already asked, so that's awesome. I had a question about the inhibition, or I'm sorry, the mock challenging samples that you used. And, you know, again, I appreciate what Dr. Souza said. I know these samples are expensive, but you use 5 samples, each representing sort of a different type of body tissue. But I feel like I didn't see anything that maybe would represent inhibition in the study. And I didn't know, you know, if you're planning on using this in casework, there might be samples that have some kind of inhibiting dye or something. Or as Dr. Coble said, if you're using it for unidentified human remains, I appreciate you did the bone, but I didn't know if there's, if maybe you want to consider doing a few more samples just to verify that the system is robust with those types of samples. I'm not sure that that's required. I don't think there's a large that there's a number that anyone has to hit, but I guess I would make that as maybe a request to maybe consider adding 1 or 2 samples that might represent an inhibited sample. And then my second question is just relating to the mixture study that you did, and you know the lowest dilution you went down was 1 to 19, and I wondered if that was informed by your global filer results, or that seems like a high dilution. I don't know how to say that. It's not very doesn't have a high ratio. Maybe that's the way to say it. 19, and I've seen other validation studies that went out a little further. And then I thought to myself, maybe make a suggestion to have you do that. But then I thought, well, maybe you did it because your global filer, if in global filer, I don't know how high your dilution goes where you see a dilution or you see a mixture rather. But I would think that could help you inform how far you have to go. So could you maybe answer that question? If the question makes sense.
So in our sexual assault case workflow, we saw like maybe 7.8 to 1 female to male ratio. Sometimes we can detect the male portion. So, and now we're using stomachs. We're also exploring like 15 to 1 female to male ratio to see if we can detect the minor contributor there. So I think, so we want to exceed that ratio in intelligence because now we are testing 19 to 1 instead of 15.2 to 1 to see if we can detect the minor contributor. In our validation, we show that even though the male portion or the minor contributor is very low, we were still able to detect the minor contributor. So the mixtures were missed by the growth filer testing can be captured by the intelligence, and we will work on the geometric growth.
Okay. I think it was a little hard to hear. I'm sorry. I guess could you just maybe let me know or discuss? Is this as far as you plan to go in your validation is 19 to 1, or is there a reason for you to look farther than that?
We just want to test some lower limits, like based on the female to male ratio or major to minor ratio. Because in casework, we know like maybe for growth filer, if the female to male ratio or major to minor ratio is 15 versus 1, we cannot detect the minor contributor. So in this validation, we want to go below that ratio, like 19 to 1. And we proved that we were still able to detect the minor contributor in this mixture.
Okay, I guess I would maybe make a suggestion, maybe go a little bit lower just to see where that drops out. Although I would sort of defer to Catherine or Mike because you have more experience with this. Maybe based on your validations, it's not necessary to go even lower than that.
We actually haven't done a lot, so I would defer to Mike in the low level range. I'd defer to Mike on it, actually.
I think from what I recall, it's been a while since it's been, I think, well over a year since we validated intelligence. And I think we went down in our validation to 50 to 1, maybe even 100 to 1, again, just to see if we can detect the mixture. And I think that even at those very low levels, if there was an authentic 49 to 1, we really couldn't pick up that 1% person. So,
and that's true. I've been working with a group that's going low, and you're kind of hitting the target right now, 1 to 20, 1 to 19, somewhere in there. I mean, and again, I think we have to balance this. There is other information out there from other laboratories, which I know you guys will refer to in your procedures and take advantage of as more labs are able to do this. This is definitely going to be a combined effort of the community because of the cost and expense. So I congratulate you guys on teaming through the working group that the companies put together. And hopefully you will have an opportunity to present some of your information so that other labs that are considering intelligence validation can start to address some of these questions collectively.
Yeah, Jen, that's really helpful. Thank you. I mean, that's sort of what I was sort of getting at is I'm not as familiar with the data, but it sounds like if, the community has shown that's far and based on what New York State Police said, that's far enough that they needed to go. That makes sense to me. That answers my
your
question.
interpretation, analytical threshold ratio. I mean, you're seeing a lot of consistency hopefully we can find a way to provide a collective breadth. So maybe as you work towards your procedures, you can incorporate your validation studies and perhaps some of the other, collective results that are showing consistency. It's interesting we use concordance to look at our calls. I think it's now time to look at concordant validation data that's out there coming from other laboratories to assist us in this, so we can move forward with these expensive tests. I think the other thing, as you do interpretation and as you write your guidelines, I think our community needs to move forward to allow educated flexibility, I'm going to call it, which will be key to the training of your analysts that are using this. And as you are moving forward, I'm going to be interested to hear how you're doing the training, how you're making sure everybody is well aware of your validation work, more so than ever, knowing what the strengths and weaknesses of these kits are going to be really important for your analysts. And I anticipate, as we've seen in some interpretation guidance, there is technical leader input as you consider some of the results in some cases. So I'm looking forward to seeing your SOP and your interpretation guidelines, because I think it's time for our community to move forward into a, like I said, educated flexibility, I'm going to call it. And the last thing, I love the idea about discovery. There's information out there from other labs that have received discovery requests that will help you inform what those discovery requests look like. And from all eternity RFLP forward, there will always be somebody that will reinterpret your data for you. And we just have to be open to that. But yeah, I think the validation at least put you on a good path to come up with a procedure and interpretation guidelines.
Actually, is a Kitty of the Director of Bioscience section. So just with respect to discovery, what we plan to do, because we had to do it with familial search and also with StarMix, is work with our counsel's office. We pretty much will have someone from counsel's office come to our lab, show them all the possible documentation that is generated in a particular technology, and that's what we plan to do with this, and then work with them to decide what specific information, documentation will be provided with discovery.
That's great.
And just with respect to familial search, this is a validation at our lab. With familial search, we're handling requests for cases that were done by all labs in New York State. So it can't be an automatic thing, because familial search may, for example, be on a case that was analyzed by OCMA. And also with familial search cases, there may not be enough sample even left to be able to proceed to do intelligence. So it's something that will offer options, because we do in our lab a tremendous number of cold case reviews. Even though we don't have the intelligence or whole genome sequencing or anything online, we are reviewing our cases with agencies at agency request to determine what sample is still available. And we generate, and again, these are cases that were originally processed at our lab. If there's sample available, we have generated more DNA so they can move forward with genealogy. So we can't really universally apply it to every familial search case, because they have to be cases that are done at our lab.
Thanks so much. Let's go to Dr. Bieber.
One last question. It's a bit off track, but given the interest in phenotype prediction with SNPs, I'm wondering if New York State is engaged with within your own team or with other groups around the country with the idea of predicting surnames from Y data. The LSJML in Quebec, in Canada, has done some very innovative work. They have the advantage in Quebec of genetic homogamy in their population, and they have resolved some important cases, either by identifying human remains or even in forensic cases where crimes have been involved, in matching Y data with last names as an investigative lead. Because as we all know, in most cultures, males give their biological sons their last name as well as their Y chromosome. So my question the direct question is, are you yet involved, or do you plan to be involved in any Y surname, Y chromosome and surname prediction as an investigative tool?
Just, we are familiar with that type of potential investigative lead because we have been asked by some agencies to provide Y data. And then they are contracting with a company, I believe one of them used Identifinders, for example. And if they are developing an investigative lead based on the Y profile that we developed, they would then provide reference samples to us to do confirmation. So that's our role at this point, is if it were asked, we will provide the Y data. But we have a lot of validations we're currently working on, so it's not something that we're planning to explore at our lab currently.
Okay, thank you.
So since Fred asked that question, I feel compelled. Are you looking at whole genome sequencing?
Yeah. We have so many things in progress we want to finish. So it's, it's so exciting, the potential that's out there, that you kind of want to be able to do everything, but we do have to focus and bring things on in a stepwise fashion.
Great.
Does anyone have any other questions for the group, for the New York State Police at the moment? Okay. I'm going to defer at the moment to Shelley and Matt for guidance. So do we need to go ahead and do a motion for the accepting, or should, based upon some discussions that we've had, maybe table until the next meeting or so?
It's certainly up to the members of the subcommittee whether you want to pursue either option, making a motion to vote on accepting or approving the validation, or making a motion to table and I guess request additional information.
Okay. So in sort of taking the pulse, I guess, of the subcommittee while we were listening and the questions that we were asking, do we want to propose a motion to approve the use of next-gen sequencing with MiSeq with the forensic intelligence kit? That's option A. Is there a motion to approve as it is the acceptance of the validation for using next-gen sequencing with the MiSeq for intelligence?
My feeling or suggestion, I don't think I would like to have that motion, or I wouldn't vote yes on that motion. I would like to make a motion that we request additional information from the New York State Police, which would include their policies and procedures. I guess their policy, I'm sorry, I'll start again. The procedure for using this technology and their interpretation policy and reporting policy for the next meeting, so that we can review that before we vote on approving this validation. That would be a motion that I would be willing to make.
Kathleen, Fred here, could we add to Kathleen's thought additional dilution studies and adding a couple of relatives to their mixture validation? Is that too much to ask in addition to what Kathleen is suggesting?
I would accept that as a friendly amendment. However, I personally don't feel at this point that the extra dilutions are necessary based on what I heard from the other people, but I do support the recommendation you made, Fred, for including relatives in that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. The relatives in the mixtures, because I think would be an important thing to see.
I think that could also be accomplished by literature search or some other way of reflecting what you would expect to see and having that in the procedure and the interpretation? Would that be suitable? I think it's so cost prohibitive to do more studies that I expect that would be really difficult, and it may be a fair compromise to include this in the interpretation guidance.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Dr. Bieber? Would that help with your thoughts on including relatives if there is data out there that where labs have done this with Kintelligence?
If the lab could show us validations done by other labs that have done that, I think I would be pleased with that.
Okay. So I think what I'll do is I'll ask if we have a motion to, as Dr. Corrado said more eloquently, and I've forgotten half of what I was writing as you were going. So do we have a motion to table the validation study until we receive some information on policy and procedures and this kind of research into relatives, that mixtures with relatives that have been done with other groups that have validated Kintelligence? Does that sort of capture everything, Kathy and Fred, that you were?
Yes.
Okay. So do we have a motion to, for the moment, table this until we receive a little bit more information, again, on the policy, procedures, and any additional mixture studies with relatives using Kintelligence?
To include interpretation.
To include interpretation, exactly.
So moved.
Okay, Dr. Bieber has made a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I second.
I'll second.
Okay, I'll go with Dr. Smith. So we will, let's see, we'll vote at this point. So please state your vote when I call on you. For again, the motion has been proposed and seconded that we table this acceptance of the validation study from the New York State Police Lab until there's some additional information that we can potentially review and then reopen this at the next subcommittee meeting. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber?
Fred Bieber, aye.
Dr. Corrado?
Aye.
Dr. Gettings?
Aye.
Dr. Smith?
Aye.
And Dr. Sozier? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you all from the New York State Police for coming. Again, I echo the compliments, a very nice presentation, excellent study. We're looking forward to getting a little bit more information on the policy, procedures, and interpretation moving forward.
I'd like to thank the subcommittee for their suggestions.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, getting back to our agenda, our next item up is laboratory disclosures. Our first lab is the Monroe County Crime Laboratory. We do have individuals able to speak. The laboratory has made 2 notifications. The first is regarding a late submission of their QAS documents to the FBI. We initially discussed this at the August 2024 meeting after the FBI acknowledged receipt of the QAS document and notified the laboratory that the late submission would result in a finding on their next audit. So the laboratory completed a corrective action and notified ANAB. The second notification is regarding an incorrect name that was provided to another laboratory in response to an INDIS hit. The corrected information exchange form was provided and the incorrect name was not released by the laboratory. The lab is investigating the issue and has revised their notification form and have put an additional check in place. Do we have any questions for the laboratory on this particular disclosure? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to the next item, which is the New York OCME Department of Forensic Biology case-to-case contamination. This is an update to the investigation into the case-to-case contamination. A retrospective review of cases examined by the criminalists involved is currently in progress. Also, since late 2024, the laboratory has provided a QC monitoring process based on a customer request. A 2021 case that was processed on request resulted in the identification of another contamination event. The lab is continuing their review. Do we have any questions for the laboratory? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to our next item. We have no items to be discussed in executive session, so we're going to move to the final agenda item, which is to end the meeting. Our next meeting of the subcommittee will be on August 8, 2025. The location will be announced at a later date. At this point, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved. Catherine Gettings.
Dr. Gettings has made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Dr. Smith has seconded the motion. So when I call on you, please state your vote. My vote is aye. Dr. Bieber?
Fred Bieber, aye.
Dr. Corrado?
Aye.
Dr. Gettings?
Aye.
Dr. Smith?
Aye.
And Dr. Sojer? Thank you. The meeting has ended. Thank you all. Have a good rest of the week and weekend, and we will see you in August.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good job, team.
Thanks, everyone.